Basically, the stuff I'm going to cover will cover all of the information that's on the exam. If you can't find the information in the handouts here, the online stuff is there. It's divided into units and stuff like that, so it really wouldn't be all that hard to find it. Yeah, hopefully you don't find yourself in that situation as this poor woman is. We're all one catastrophe away from all being the center of a CNN event, as we like to call it. Your job is, in many cases, to educate the public. It's to help folks make the right decision. And as a PIO, you'll likely communicate public information, emergency public information, as well as conduct community education. 3 types of communication. Very simply, public information is the general information that a PIO pushes out there. Whether it's class schedules, whether it's meeting schedules, emergency public information. That's when you're getting the information out to the public that is life-saving. And then ultimately community education, the pre-event education, sort of the preparedness information you might share with your community. Getting into the flood season, you have some information you want to get to people about what to do to prepare your home. So those programs that you push out to educate the public in a non-emergency situation. Target audiences. A lot of times your message that you're pushing out there and the audiences you're trying to reach can be very separate. Coming into hurricane season, I send out like 14 different press releases every year, and basically they all have a different audience. Boaters, business owners, people who need special assistance, people who live along the coast, people who live inland, who have the threat of inland freshwater flooding. There are external target audiences, which we always tend to think of. You're interfacing with the media. They're your way to get to the public in many ways. We'll talk about other ways to work around the media, certainly. But as a general rule, I've found that the media that I have to deal with across the state is generally pretty helpful. They see the fact that they do wear 2 hats. One is they're news people, and one is during times of disaster, they're a public safety. They almost see themselves as part of the solution, if you will. But that being said, when the event's over, the phone will ring and that same person will be calling and say, okay, now who screwed up here? Who made the mistake? And who's to blame, etc. Hey, that's their job. I understand that part. They're a lot of help to get the word out to the public, and many of them do see themselves as partners when it comes to emergencies. There are also internal target audiences, which we all tend to forget about. Just because you're pushing it out to the media doesn't mean your bosses are being aware. So it's very important to let them know what messages you're going to be pushing out, or in many ways, as we'll see when we get to the incident command system, it's a collaborative effort that the leadership is very much involved with your messaging. Also, internally. When I first started doing this job, I always neglected to let the folks in my agency know the same things I was pushing out to the media. I wasn't educating the folks I work with. Nothing else, just give them a heads up. So they're like Jimmy the Dunce, when they go home and someone said, hey, I saw so-and-so on TV and he said this, and they know nothing about it. Obviously, demographics are an issue when you're forming your messaging. Folks who are new to the country, not just they don't speak English, but they're totally unfamiliar with how government works, or age, income, folks with special needs. I know it's a PR type of thing, and some people say, that's not our job. It's part of it. It's not the big chunk of it, but certainly it's part of it. I like to say, I have my job because not everybody has a grandmother to tell them. In other words, most of the stuff that I'm telling people is kind of the oh yeah stuff. Whether it's how you pile wood next to your house in the dry season, I'm more reminding them of the stuff that they should be doing, and they're going, I should be doing that. Thanks for telling me. So you don't think it's redundant, or people know this. Include the marginal stuff. Trust me, you're going to get people who maybe don't quite get it, or just forget about it. good qualities of a PIO. Somebody should be knowledgeable, analytical, credible. The people who get in trouble are the people who get caught lying about the mistake. It's the cover-up that gets people, not the act. So bear that in mind. As a PIO, your credibility with the public, your credibility with the media. You promise something, deliver what you promise. Accessible is also pretty important as well. Being a PIO that has all these qualities, knows all the information, but the media can't get a hold of, or you don't return phone calls, doesn't work well. And skills needed. You've got pretty good written and oral skills, media relations, community awareness, knowing about your community, and the emergency management knowledge, basically to make it work at the scene during an event in this day of incident command system, is probably not a bad piece to have. Remember, writing and speaking, the job is not to impress people, it's to educate people. But being well organized, clear, concise language. At the end of the day, when you're done sending a message out, hopefully everybody understands it. And that's your job. I got an advantage. As I said, I was a school teacher. I taught 12-year-olds. I taught 6th grade for 12 years. So I figure that's my audience. You want to be as simple and plain as possible. You don't get any brownie points by using the 25-cent words or getting real, trying to show everybody how smart you are. Media relations. Okay, developing credibility and building relationships. Talked about the credibility piece, but building relationships. Very important.
Well, that's actually a problem because a lot of our radio stations are on automatic during the weekend. And so trying to get contacts and keep those contacts current, do you have any solution for that? Because
unfortunately, that's a problem everywhere, where all the radio stations used to have actual live people there, and then a person actually reading the news. And now there's some guy in Omaha programming the radio station. But what media you do have, I think it's very important for you to build that relationship with them. And don't wait for the disaster. Always easy to do stuff on the sunny days. Reach out to these people. Explain to them what you do. You'd be surprised at their lack of knowledge of what sort of source of information you might be. Because I say invariably, we're going to get the first freeze, and somewhere, even if it's up in New Hampshire, some kid or some dog is going through the ice, and that's going to be a big story. And if they know that you have a nice safety team, a lot of times the media come knocking on your door and say, hey, tell how your community is so much safer than that community where they lost the kid. Again, getting ahead of the curve, letting the media know that what you've got can be newsworthy down the road. It always doesn't have to happen locally for it to be a local story. So, just because you say, oh, I'm a sleepy little town, nothing exciting ever happens here. The reality is, if it happens somewhere else, the media can always reach back to you and say, well, what if it does happen here? Community awareness. Okay, people in here, elected officials, should have a pretty thorough understanding of the community. The demographics and, the structure, who the key players are. I expect most everybody in this room here would probably come under that category of key players. Then emergency management, you would say, well, that's why we have an emergency management director, right? I don't get into that. Well, no, because a lot of times you're going to have a microphone stuck in your face and someone's going to ask you a question that they think, or the public might think you should know the answer to. Your basic emergency management concept. Every community pretty much should have a comprehensive local plan, even if it's just the general stuff, where the potential shelters might be in your community, where the potential evacuation routes are in the community, what things could go wrong. You should be aware of that kind of stuff. The incident command system, that comes into play when something goes wrong, particularly a relatively big thing. The easy stuff, not a problem. But a big thing, all of a sudden the PIO has a role, fits into that system. Have a good idea how that system works. And then we're also going to get into the Joint Information System and the Joint Information Center. as we move forward here. Just to let you know, very briefly, the Joint Information System is how you do it. The JIC, or the Joint Information Center, is where you do it. To put it in simple terms. We're going to talk a little about the sources and resources, the tools and the resources that you're going to need to feed the beast. The beast being the media. If you have information, share it, because if you don't get your story out, they're going to get it from somebody else, and it may not be, correct. It may be the other side of the story, so to speak. So you always want to get your story out there. Don't avoid the media if at all possible. News media is the organization's linked to the public before, during, and after a public safety event. Now the types of media we're going to talk about. Traditional media is changed. It has to change. Television is still the leader in the clubhouse, just a little bit. But television #1, the internet, the web, social media, etc., is #2, but coming on strong on the outside. So that evolving media, or the new media, whatever they're calling it today, websites, emails, blogs, social networking sites, etc. So just don't dismiss any particular part of the media, because every bit of it reaches some audience, and maybe it was an audience that you weren't reaching with your message before. I know myself from the Facebook, Twitter stuff. I just said, I don't have the time during a disaster. I'm dealing with the regular media. We're doing press briefings, we're in meetings, whatever. That's way too much work. And also, I didn't have the equivalent of a 14-year-old kid working with us. So two things kind of came in. First of all, we hired that 14-year-old kid. And if you don't have one, find one. Okay. He enlightened me. He educated me of how easy this was. Now I get somebody that actually will do this during a disaster. So that life is just beautiful for me right now. When it was just me, I would take just a minute to put in, okay, 9 o'clock power outages. Just throw it up there, hit it, boom, it was up there. It eliminated about 8 or 9 hourly phone calls from Jimmy the intern at all of the newspapers and television stations to ask me about what the outage numbers were. They all knew. They all subscribed. They all follow us because they're looking for sources as well. So I found that had just cut down on my time. And I was initially using it as a tool to push stuff out. Okay? Wasn't looking to interact with people. That I still don't have time to do. Now we have some people that, when time permits, can do some interacting with folks. Basically, they're monitoring the media at least to find out, situational awareness. Are there any issues out there that are kind of flying under the radar that, But generally speaking, interacting with folks can be challenging unless you got somebody that's sort of their dedicated time. I mean, we put up, the caveat that says, this site isn't monitored 24/7. So if you really need assistance, call 911. I've seen surveys, 60% of the people feel that if they post something on an emergency management, a Facebook page or a Twitter page, that's going to be enough to get the fire engines rolling down the street to their house. And that may very well be the way, they go. I mean, right now, 911 does not, answer, doesn't receive text. They don't have the technology.
Right.
That may change dramatically. But the point I'm trying to make right now is the expectation out there is that anybody that has a public safety entity that has a Facebook page or whatever, they think there's somebody there reading it, like there's somebody sitting there answering the telephone and saying, okay, ma'am, we're on our way. It's not necessarily the case. That's why you want to have that caveat if you're not. Yes?
During Sandy, there were departments in Queens where 911 was so busy people couldn't get through, and the only way they could get the message through was to use Facebook to tell the responders they were stuck in their house.
Yeah, and if they're responding, it's great. I mean, that's the point. But if there's no one at the other end, that's like saying I called and I left a voicemail message with the fire department to come and save me. Okay, what the media wants answers to. The same stuff that your 4th grade teacher wanted you to write when you're writing compositions. The who, what, when, where, why, and how. It's the why and the how that can get really problematic. A lot of times, those just aren't, the cause of many things are just not easily answered right off the bat. Usually there are investigations or research. Also, sometimes there's political reasons why, you haven't formulated a good answer yet, why something went terribly wrong. And an acceptable answer in many cases, I don't know right now, but when we do know, I'll get back to you. That is an acceptable answer. Ignoring it, ignoring returning phone calls, doesn't work. We've got an event, a storm or something, the media shows up and wants an update. And nothing's changed. Nothing's changed, but when something changes, I'll let you know, or I'll check in an hour or so to let you know if something has changed. I highly recommend that. Don't just ignore them because they don't care. If there's nothing to tell them, they don't care. Yes, they do care. Because if nothing else, when they go on live at 11, they've got one or two options. One is, okay, we're at the scene, and for whatever reason, no one here is speaking to us. What are they hiding? As opposed to, I just spoke with the local official who told me that nothing has changed at this point. It demonstrates that this reporter is doing their job, they spoke to the people in the know, and went to the highest sources. The highest sources say there's no new news. That's an answer. They can run with that. Okay, the print media. For my money, weekly papers are my gold. The daily paper, me getting something in the Boston Globe, la-di-da. But me getting something in the Stoneham Independent, for me, helps me probably more than getting something in the Boston Globe. Because the reality of it is, daily newspapers, people miss it, it's gone. Tomorrow they get tomorrow's paper. And the fact of the matter is, people who write or edit or produce weekly newspapers are desperate for stuff to put in there. And if you can help them by giving them stuff, they will print it. My 14 weeks of press releases about hurricane preparedness, I know about 45 weekly newspapers in the Commonwealth that run every week. I get 14 weeks of hurricane preparedness coverage because it fills about this much of a page for them. They don't have to worry about that for the next 14 weeks. Also, any specialty, depending on where you live and what your demographics are. Many times there are specialty foreign language newspapers. Most of them tend to say, just send it in English, we'll translate it for you. Don't shy away from the non-English speaking outlets that are out there. They'll work with you. They'll find a way. And also part of it, initially I said, well, gee, if I send them that and they translate it, how will I know that they're translating correctly? Hey, I don't know the English-speaking folks are doing it right in the regular newspapers. You'd be surprised how many times they foul that up. So if that's your worry, you'll never sleep at night. So don't worry about that. They're very, very conscientious. Okay, what print folks want? They're looking for a lot of details. They're painting the picture. They want to know the history, how many times this happened before in this community, as much detail as you can get. I mean, sometimes you get someone's doing a story, they're just calling you for a quote or just some for insight. But if they're writing a story that entails, what you do, it can be multiple phone calls after the interview to checking facts and stuff like that. You don't see that with the other media. Any background, any paperwork, any stuff I can have is going to be helpful because very rarely do they not ask me something that I have to scurry around and find the information for them. Now radio. Radio, it's not a monolith in that there are all types of radio out there, which is too bad because the one thing that works when all the lights go out is the radio. If you've got your battery powered or your crank radio, most interviews for radio, they're looking for 12 seconds of a soundbite out of you. They may record 5 minutes of talking, but your voice will probably go in 12, 15 seconds. But the other 4.5 minutes, that information basically has helped them write the story. Okay, public radio, if one of the NPR stations wants to interview you, they're as close to a newspaper as the electronic media gets. If it's an NPR station, I'm usually prepared for a longer period of time, a lot more detail, which is great. College stations, depending on, what sort of signal they have and depending on what sort of audience they have, that's an audience to reach. And if you're in a college town, that's one of your demographics, that's one of your audiences out there. A talk radio, again, could be good, could be bad, but generally speaking, again, the media can and will help you. And again, the specialty stations that we kind of talked about, the non-English speaking stations, can be a key. Television, okay, the world of television news certainly has changed dramatically in our lifetimes. In the Boston stations, they come on at 4:30 in the morning now. Only because one of them did it. And now they all do it. And then you have NECN, New England Cable News. If you watch it, you'll say, gee, this is the 19th time I've seen this interview today. They do blocks, and then they run the blocks over and over again. So, which can be good if it's a good story. It can be bad if it's a bad story. But, in all fairness, it doesn't take much for something to become, a major event, that international event, if you will. I know I had someone in my class who was a patrolman, small town, Natick, Massachusetts. Up to that point, they had a moose in town.
Oh,
So they got the animal control officers, they kind of trapped the moose in some lady's backyard. One TV station showed up, and they were on at 10 o'clock at night, and everybody said the real news used to come on at 11, okay? 2 animal control officers get out of the truck and walk up, get on the lady's back porch, and proceed to put 2 bullets in the back of the moose's head. Boom! All of a sudden it became like the police assassinated the moose. But the piece runs, the phone doesn't ring. Okay, 11 o'clock comes, 11:05, the phone starts to bounce off the hook. The reason is, Fox shared their video with the other stations in town, and everybody was leading with the dead moose story. I mean, it was just one of those situations that anybody can have a CNN moment, okay? So, just be warned. Local access television, how many people have a local access station? I treat them like I treat my weekly newspapers. They're gold. They need to fill that time. I mean, I did something with the Red Cross a number of years ago. Although, I get calls from somebody, gee, you're on my TV last night talking about something. Your hair wasn't as gray then. What happened? Because it was like 5 years ago when I did it. Yeah. So if you have some opportunities to have your own little show or a slot of time to get information out to the people, they'll help you out. And from a perspective of trying to get the media to cover an event of yours, if you've got visuals, a TV station is more apt to show up. I mean, I work with my training department to promote some of our training events. I remember when I first started doing a weapons of mass destruction training, where we're bringing in local police chiefs and fire chiefs and National Guard folks. But I would get calls back from TV stations saying, if you guys ever go out to the parking lot and have like smoke bombs and a guy in a moon suit, call me. We'll come and we'll cover the class. What's the story? The story is the class. The story has not changed,
right.
But they got this cool picture now, and that's their incentive to show up. And we'll talk about all of a sudden, the quality of video is not what it had to be before. But anybody who's got one of these things is now a citizen journalist, because those stations will run with it. Because they don't have somebody with boots on the ground, but somebody posted it or somebody sent it to them. And I always say about media, and I'll mention it again, always treat all microphones, all pencils, all cameras as live all the time. Just don't assume, okay, they're not filming now. They might be, they're still there, they might still be listening. So before it used to be once, they pack up, they get in their truck and drive away, you can exhale. No, as long as there was a kid standing around with one of these, it's still showtime. Okay, you gotta be aware, you gotta be careful. Now I said, You know, the web, utilizing the web yourself. How many folks here have a town or a department website that they have access to? Okay, how many people take advantage of it? Excellent, excellent, okay. Upside of all this stuff is, gives you the ability to get unfiltered, unfettered information out there. You're not going through some media editor. What you want to do is become the source. You want to get the reputation that the information you're giving out there is the right information, the correct information. You know, there's just not another voice out there.
I just had a question about how often do you need to turn over your information to make sure people do in fact use your website the way you want it?
As often as possible. You want to keep it fresh, you want to keep it updated as much as you can. Also, I reach out to other entities. In addition to pushing it out to the media, I'm pushing stuff out to our private sector partners, pushing that stuff out to other state agencies, putting the consulates in the greater Boston area. Social media, okay, new kid on the block, this two-way conversation, two-way communication. Right now, if Facebook were a country, Facebook would be the third largest country in the world. Twitter, about 500 million people, and that's growing. You want to be part of it wherever possible. But it gives you the ability to rapidly respond to stuff. If the dam is about to break, that's not a time to be typing up a news release to send to the weekly newspaper, you know, and it's Tuesday, and hopefully they'll get it by Thursday, you know. That's the time where you want to push those reports out, that information out, as quickly as possible to as many, you know, destinations as possible. And the new media, you know, whether it's interaction or it's just posting a blog, a weekly blog about a subject, and giving people an opportunity to kind of comment on it, that's terrific. Or if it's something more of a Twitter situation where there's back and forth. What all organizations want: rapid response to questions. As I said, even if the answer is, I don't know. Interviews. They ask for the mayor or the town administrator, and then the chief, lieutenant, the PIO, they're always looking for interviews. And when you watch the news, you're going to see a lot of silly ones out there. But they needed a face. They needed somebody to talk to. So why can't it be you? You can get your story out there. Shutting them out doesn't mean the story's going to go away. They're going to talk to somebody. Yes?
How do you manage your people to make sure that you're the person that the media talks to?
Have a written policy and have them sign it.
Okay.
I think it raises the level of, we're serious about this. We don't want you talking to the media. You know, formal policies about folks who work for you or in your town relative to what they can or can't put up on their Facebook page. Okay. And it probably is.
You could fire them.
You could fire them. Okay. Okay. Yes.
I was just going to say that another thing that sometimes helps counteract that kind of bad information is that once you've become recognized as the credible source for this topic within the community, the media and other sources will come to you after they've heard whatever, or they'll come to you first before the other option gets out, and that helps to kind of keep things going.
Right, that's an excellent point. Media monitoring. Following up, you do an interview with someone. Read the paper the next day. See if they got it right. And if they didn't, then you got something to deal with. But it also, if you send out a press release and no matter where you look, you can't find anybody picking up that information anywhere, maybe it wasn't an effective press release. The press release is, more times than not, is not a standalone entity. It's an invitation. It's saying, I know stuff. You want to talk to me about the stuff? Here's some of the stuff. I got more details if you want to call me. Okay, that's essentially what it is. How to communicate effectively, effective writing. Okay, number of types of products you can produce, but essentially news releases are the key. It's a great opportunity to get your stuff out, get ahead of the curve, if you will. Write for your audience. If your audience is kids, you're going to write a little differently. If it's elderly people, if it's the general public. Understandable language, avoid the acronyms, avoid the abbreviations. Concise, declarative sentences. Use short paragraphs, really key. press release, short paragraphs, 1 or 2 sentences, leave a space, 1 or 2 sentences, leave a space. You take that same thing, you swoosh it into one big paragraph, people won't read it. How impactful is it? You know, the corner store closing down is not as impactful as the plant in town closing down. Is it timely? If it's 2 or 3 days old, most media doesn't care anymore. Proximity. Who's impacted? The people here. Now the proximity thing might become important if there are people within your community who have relatives who were killed in that earthquake in Turkey, then that becomes a story. Any of us driving home this evening gets pulled over for speeding, probably not going to be front page news. You know, Tom Brady, all of a sudden, you know, it's the news cycle for 24 hours. So the prominence of who and what certainly makes it news. Okay, writing a press release. Just like a presentation, think of the inverted pyramid. Okay, the most important stuff is up top. And as you get further down, you get to the supporting facts, the least important stuff. It's like writing a resume. If you don't have your interest halfway down, you're not going to read all the way down to the bottom. When I set up a press release, it's usually my lead sentence, which I try to include as much of the key information, so it's almost a standalone, if you will. Maybe a supporting sentence after it. Then I put a quote in from my director or the governor, or whoever I want to make up a quote about. And then, well, you write it and then you say, okay, you know, I've never written a quote that somebody actually told me and I wrote it down. I kind of tell them, is this going to work for you? And they will say, yeah. Okay, if you're doing a news release, do it on something that looks official. People will look at it. If it's not official, it doesn't have letterhead, doesn't have your little symbol up there, yeah, they may not have the time to look at it. We're trying to get the media to come back to talk to us. So why? So we want to be able to give them a way to do that, whether it's your email address, your phone address. News release number, never a bad idea. That way if someone's calling a week later and they make reference to a press release, I know which one they want to talk about. Oral communication. Dealing with media, dealing with the public. The do's, respond honestly. I've been saying that and I can't say it enough. You get to the important stuff first. You don't save it to the end. You don't go chronological. You go what's more important. Because you may be 3 sentences into it and their beeper goes off and they're going to get to a fire or something like that and you never got to the good stuff. 3 key messages you want to talk about. Don't come up with more than 3. People won't retain it. You probably won't remember it. You know, have a kit, develop a plan, be informed. And I build off that. You control the interview. From the beginning to the end, you're in charge, not them. Same thing with an end of an interview. When you're done, you don't have to stay around forever. You say, hey, I've got another meeting, another interview, or whatever, we're done. And also, my interview starts even before that. I have people come down and meet me, I meet them at the front desk, and as we decide where we're going to go do it, I start the interview. I tell them, I'm not hooked up or anything, but I tell them what I want to talk about. Okay, showing compassion and empathy. And one tip, don't tell people you know how they feel. You don't. You want to empathize with them, but you don't want to go too far. Knowing when to stop, because they'll ask you a question, you've answered the question, and they haven't asked you another question. So a little voice in your mind says, well, I guess I'm not done, so I'm going to keep talking. Well, you're not going to say anything really stupid, but all of a sudden you've got away from the key points you want to make, and you're just kind of talking about a lot of the peripheral type of stuff that maybe isn't all that important. Then a little bit, that's what will end up showing up in the news that night. And be conscious of your non-verbal communication. Seems obvious, but if it's a sad event, obviously you want to have the sad face on. Assume everybody's watching you, okay? And one thing I've seen where people are asking a question that is going to get a negative response, but what we tend to do if it's a long question is we tend to nod when somebody's asking you the question. We're both nodding yes while the question was being asked. And the answer was obviously no. Okay, the don'ts, the acronyms, the jargons. Okay, find a better way to say no comment. No comment means we're guilty and I'm not sharing you this information. Can't answer that question right now, we'll answer it later. You know, it's under investigation, etc. Going off the record, do not go off the record, okay? Off the record means the reporter will not reveal the source, unless the reporter has to reveal the source. Don't speculate, answer hypothetical questions. You know, okay, we can't talk about that, but what we do want to talk about is what did happen, and what did happen is A, B, and C. Get back to your talking points. Get back to what you want to talk about. Don't comment on other organizations. Okay, even if it's, I hate to say it, even if it's nice. How's the guy in the next town doing? You say, oh, he's doing a great job, and then you see the paper the next day, how the guy is now in the Bahamas with all the money and all this kind of stuff, then you look like either you don't know what you're talking about, or maybe you're in cahoots with them. Discussing costs. You know, how much does it cost to have all these fire trucks, being at this event? Well, we are not concerned with the cost. We're concerned about saving lives. We're concerned about the safety of the community. We'll deal with the costs in due time. Working with the media. If you do end up with that CNN event, don't blow your local media off, okay? Don't give, somebody from the national media the exclusive interview. Create a media contact list. Figure out who your media is, include them. News briefings, news conferences. The difference is, I have a news briefing, the governor has a news conference. Okay, news conferences are usually announced, you're inviting the media. A news briefing is, they're probably already there. I'm just giving them updates, if you will. And sometimes this news conferences will also deal with multiple issues. Yes?
In the news conference with the governor or the top
Yep.
official, you're there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Herding the cats is basically my job at that point. And then afterwards, I'm making sure that, okay, who is the guy next to the governor? How do you spell his name? Type of stuff. Or can you clarify the point? The governor said this was going to happen, and hopefully he's right and not dead wrong, and you've got to contradict what he just said. That's where you want to be diplomatic about it. Maybe he misunderstood your question. This is the right information. Because ultimately, they want to get the right information. You don't hold a news conference unless there's something to say. They're not going to come unless it's an important subject. Inversely, if you have something very important to say, don't save it for the news conference. Lives and property and whatever is at stake at that point. Having a news conference, you want to minimize the distractions. I always say you want to try to have it indoors, but try not to have it in the gym because of the acoustics. Have handouts available. If it's a complicated subject, give speakers a clear access and egress. You don't want to have to walk through the media to get out. Because, believe it or not, when you say we're over, they don't sit quietly with their hands folded as you walk by. They may even ask another question or follow you out the door. Choosing a spokesperson. Pick somebody who's going to be good at it. Ideally, the boss is that person because they bring that credibility. Okay, this section here, unfortunately, always gets short shift, but public awareness campaigns. Research the issue. Is it important to your community? Or are you just doing it because you want to get the giant check mark, or you found some cool stuff you want to spread out, to people? Analyze your target audience. Who is this going to impact? Is it going to impact anybody? Okay, you want to develop a goal statement. In other words, SMART they use. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it recorded? I have no idea what that means. Is it time bound? Okay, you want to figure out, okay, what steps am I going to tell people to take? My goal is by March 1st, I want to have at least two media placements in newspapers, one in a radio station, one in the local access TV station, and I want to be sending out weekly tweets or Facebook messages every week until May 1st. That's kind of that whole goal thing. Identify the timing, you don't want to do hurricane safety in December. A lot of stuff, particularly where you're looking to change attitudes, where you're looking to have people, take the proper steps, that takes a little bit more work. Sometimes you got to do surveys. So maybe you send a flyer, or you go online, or somehow you have people, how many people have emergency kits? And then you realize that number is not as high as it should be. You have a campaign promoting that, and then after the fact, you do a second, poll. Communicating at the scene. Okay, you don't want to look out your window and see this, okay? That's probably not a good day at town hall. Being effective in emergency. Now, this is the incident command system. The PIO is joined at the hip with the incident commander. PIO does not go out there and talk to the media until he or she has cleared stuff with the incident commander. There's an understanding that if you're going to clear the traditional media stuff with the incident commander, you're also going to clear any of the social media stuff. Again, the PIO is part of the incident command structure and advises the incident commander on all public information matters. Remember, as a PIO, you bring in a certain amount of expertise about what is going to fly, what's not going to fly. Should we talk about this now? Should we hold back? Whatever. You become a real sounding board. When you get to the scene, okay, you make contact, you find out what the situation is, what the objectives are going to be, what's already happened. Are there any warnings that have already been given to the public? And before you're making up press releases about sheltering in place, have they already evacuated the area? Stuff like that. Are there any restrictions on information? Are there any things we don't want to share with the media at this particular point? And also beginning to coordinate the media. You got to figure out where to put them many times, because you don't want to get in the way of the firefighters, or you want to keep your people safe. That's way more important than what the media wants. Generally, they have no problem as long as you're not playing favorites and everybody's stuck there together. It's a place that you're going to have your briefings. That's what kind of keeps them there, because every half hour you're going to be back there to talk to them. And the yellow tape's there for a reason. You tell the guy with the $40,000 camera, you cross that, we're going to have to decon it, which means you'll get it back. It'll be a bag of stuff. So stay on this side of the tape. They'll listen. If you can tell them where the bathrooms are, they will be your friends. If you let them know where they can get something to eat. If you let them know maybe where they can get a hardline phone. Say there was an anthrax event. Okay, initially you're going to have, at various times, the lead dog on this thing is going to be public health, probably the fire services, because now it's a hazmat issue, if you will. Police. It's going to be a law enforcement event. And what's going to happen is, during these events, these changing events, the different incident commander or the different agency in charge will actually change who the lead PIO is. Because the lead PIO is the PIO of the agency that is now the lead dog, if you will. It's a big enough event that you need to take my day-to-day job and break it down. I need help. I can't do the press releases and the interviews and the media monitoring. I now have a PIO that comes in, but her job is now babysitting the media and chasing down questions for them. Breaks the job down into individual pods, if you will. I have an incredibly unique situation, unlike almost any other PIO in the state, in that all PIOs kind of speak for their agency. That's their job. My job is, I speak for all of the agencies that are there. There could be 30, 40 agencies in the operations center. Okay. Many of them give me information that they want me to share with the assembled media. When people are saying, well, wait a second, you're saying this, and that agency is saying that. Which is it? Do you guys know what you're talking about? Kind of scenario. So getting the little stuff, ducks in a row, is very, very important. And ensures timely, accurate, accessible, and consistent messaging. We'll go to the Joint Information Center. That's the place where everybody shows up, if you will. There are occasions when physically they are there to do their job. You still have your own message. We talk about having one voice and singing off the same sheet of paper and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that everybody's saying the same thing. It means what you're saying doesn't contradict what the other guy's saying. Okay? The fire department's gonna talk about the fire impact of this, and the police department's gonna talk about the police department on this, and, you know, everyone has to agree that, what the stories are, the big picture items, if you will. This is stuff I pulled off of the web, you know, off of that independent study course. If there are some things that I kind of blew by, that you want more information on, it's there, it's easy to find. You know, you gotta go there to take the test anyway. I think I pretty much touched almost everything that's on the test, and anything that's not specific on the test is like a common sense kind of question.